What happens when one of the highest legal minds in the country tries to corner the world's most unpredictable billionaire? In a courtroom showdown no one saw coming, a powerful judge thought she could silence him with the weight of the law. But as the pressure mounted, something shocking unfolded. This wasn't just a battle of authority. It turned into a clash of intellect. And what the judge discovered next, let's just say, it changed everything. A high-ranking legal figure known for strict interpretations of the law and a commanding courtroom presence found themselves in a position where they needed to address a rising conflict involving a major public figure. The situation had begun to attract national attention, not because of a criminal case or a public safety issue, but due to complex legal tensions tied to technology, business, and influence. In such situations, courts are expected to uphold balance and clarity, and that often means confronting individuals or companies that appear to operate outside of traditional boundaries. In this particular case, the legal authority felt it necessary to step in, not just as a neutral interpreter of the law, but as someone who needed to remind others of the limits of their power. This was not a casual move. The decision to directly engage was part of a larger strategy that legal institutions sometimes use when they believe someone is testing the edge of what the law allows. Sometimes a strong statement or direct challenge can bring about compliance. Other times it sends a message to others watching that the system still holds authority, even over the most powerful and well-known figures in society. The individual being challenged had become a symbol of innovation and disruption. With major involvement in industries like space, energy, and artificial intelligence, their actions didn't just affect shareholders or consumers, they had the potential to shape global markets and influence public opinion. The law, however, doesn't bend for fame or success. That's where the confrontation began. From the legal side, the approach was methodical. There were official notices, court instructions, and formal communications. The language used was direct and firm. Legal documents and court appearances are often shaped not just by facts but also by tone. A strong tone can deliver more than just legal content. It can carry authority, even intimidation. In this case, that was the intention. The message was simple. No one is above the law, and even individuals with massive influence would need to comply, answer questions, or face consequences. There was also a strategic layer. By appearing tough and unyielding, the judge may have hoped to limit further challenges. If this well-known figure could be pressured into retreating or showing weakness, others who might think about resisting legal oversight would likely fall in line. This approach relies on both law and psychology. Courts can't physically enforce every rule instantly. Instead, they rely on respect for the institution. When a person with large-scale visibility is brought into the courtroom and held to account, it reminds everyone watching, politicians, CEOs, the public, that rules still apply. This method works most of the time. Often, even the most confident individuals will soften under legal pressure, especially when it comes from a judge with a reputation for being tough. Legal systems are built to protect fairness, but they are also built to ensure control. Challenging a court's authority rarely ends well. And yet this moment would unfold very differently than expected. What the legal figure might not have fully anticipated was the depth of preparation and legal understanding the other party brought into the situation. The challenge wasn't met with avoidance or confusion. Instead, it triggered a sharp and well-informed response that turned the situation into something more than just a show of authority. Still, in the beginning stages, the judge likely saw this as a clear exercise of courtroom control. There was no reason to believe that things wouldn't follow the usual pattern. That includes the formal pressure of legal questioning, the presence of multiple attorneys, and a strong push to make the other party acknowledge the court's authority quickly and without resistance. These moves are designed to create structure in unpredictable situations and to contain any attempts at avoiding responsibility. From the outside, it may have looked like a textbook case of a judge reasserting legal order over someone who had been operating in a space too loosely defined by regulation. The fact that the figure in question was known for moving quickly, breaking norms, and challenging slow systems only increased the urgency for legal response. In moments like these, judges are often less focused on individual behavior and more focused on the bigger picture, how future actors might behave if boundaries are not enforced now. That's why the first move in this legal encounter was designed to apply pressure. Pressure doesn't always mean punishment. Sometimes it means asking hard questions in public. Sometimes it means using formal language that sounds more serious than casual conversation. And often it means letting the other party know that the eyes of the entire legal system are now watching. The expectation is that such pressure leads to compliance, possibly even public retreat. In the world of law and power, intentions matter just as much as actions. When a person in a very high legal position takes steps against someone well-known like a billionaire business leader, the reasons behind those steps become just as important as the legal process itself. In this case, it was not just a matter of asking questions or enforcing rules. The real goal was something deeper. It was to make the other person feel pressured, outmatched, and cornered. The legal move wasn't only about right or wrong, it was about control. This kind of approach is sometimes seen when people in authority want to remind others who holds the final power. The tone, the body language, and even the choice of words can send a message. You may be rich and famous, but here I am in charge. This is a very old tactic. When direct punishment is not possible, making someone feel small or uncertain is the next best strategy. That's where intimidation begins, not in shouting but in quiet, confident pressure. The situation started with a formal legal issue, but the way it was handled showed more than just concern for the law. The process was shaped in a way that made it feel personal. There was a sense that the aim was to unsettle the other person, to shake their confidence in public. Instead of simple facts and fair questions, there was a tone of sharpness and control, as if a line had been drawn in the sand. The message was, "You've stepped too far, and now you'll be shown your place." This kind of tactic often works on people who are not used to legal environments. Most individuals feel nervous in courtrooms or when facing official systems. Even strong public figures can feel the pressure when they're placed under legal lights. The setting is designed to favor the system. From the heavy rules to the long procedures, it's easy for someone, even a billionaire, to feel overwhelmed. That's why when someone in authority uses this system to add pressure, it can be extremely effective. In this situation, the person being challenged was known for boldness in business and for speaking freely. But boldness in public or in business is not always the same as confidence under legal fire. Those who work within the law often count on that difference. They expect that someone loud in public may not be as strong when asked to explain their actions in court language, and so they begin with strong words, pressing questions, and an official tone that seems almost impossible to argue against. The aim is not to argue the truth only, but to make the other person doubt their position. It's like turning up the heat, not to burn them, but to make them sweat. The hope is that the other side will step back, apologize quickly, or even admit fault just to make the pressure stop. It is psychological, not just legal. It uses fear, not loud fear, but quiet, serious, controlled pressure to shift the balance. This strategy is also used to set an example. When someone with power believes that another person is becoming too bold or difficult, they may try to bring them down not just for their own sake, but to show others what can happen if you go too far. In this case, the legal challenge may have been designed to do more than stop a specific action. It may have been meant to send a message to many others. Stay in your place, follow the rules, or face someone bigger than you. Using intimidation through legal power is subtle. It's not always about threats. Instead, it comes through sharp looks, legal terms spoken with confidence, and procedures that feel one-sided. The person facing this might start to feel like no matter what they say, it won't be enough. They may feel like every move is being judged and every answer is being used against them. That's what makes it powerful. But this kind of approach depends on the other side being unprepared. If the person facing the pressure is unsure, they may crack. That's when the tactic succeeds. But if the target sees the game being played, if they understand the laws, the tricks, and the deeper motives, then the pressure loses its effect. Instead of backing down, they respond with calm facts. They don't react emotionally. They match every strong word with quiet knowledge. That's when the balance starts to shift and the person using pressure may begin to realize they underestimated the other side. When a powerful legal figure takes aim at a public personality, especially one known for bold opinions and disruptive innovation, many expect the individual to retreat or respond through a team of lawyers. It's a common scene. When authority pushes, people often step back, especially in the face of a legal system that can feel overwhelming. But in this situation, things did not go as expected. The person at the center of the challenge chose not to take the usual route. Instead of hiding behind legal teams or public statements, he faced the matter directly. And that changed everything. The moment the courtroom encounter began, it was clear that the legal authority intended to put pressure on the individual. With an assertive tone and a commanding presence, the legal figure issued statements designed to corner and challenge. The questioning was sharp, and the legal arguments were framed to create pressure. For many watching, the tension was obvious. Most people in this position would have leaned heavily on their lawyers, stayed silent, or chosen to avoid direct confrontation. But in this case, the approach was completely different. Rather than responding with fear or hesitation, the individual stood confidently. His posture, tone, and words reflected calm thinking, not panic. He listened carefully to the statements being made, and when it was time to speak, his responses were clear and well-informed. He did not interrupt or speak emotionally. Instead, he answered with facts, legal understanding, and deep awareness of the topic. It was clear that he had studied the situation, knew the laws in question, and understood how to speak in legal terms, something few expected from someone outside the legal world. What stood out most was the way he used knowledge to take control of the situation. Instead of reacting emotionally or defensively, he walked through each argument with logic. For example, when presented with a legal claim meant to push him into a corner, he responded not with defiance, but with a calm explanation of why the claim didn't apply in the way it was being framed. He pointed out the parts of the law that were relevant, including key exceptions and important case history. This wasn't random knowledge. It was focused and strategic. Each point connected directly to the issue at hand. Observers noticed that this wasn't just a lucky response or a speech memorized from a lawyer's notes. The person speaking truly understood the ideas behind the law. He referred to precedent, past cases that had already settled similar legal questions. He used simple language, but his arguments were full of detail and accuracy. It became clear that he had taken time to study the system that many people fear. That effort gave him the ability to stand firm even when a legal expert was trying to shake his position. There was a moment in the exchange where things shifted. The legal figure, who had started with full control of the room, began to slow down. The questions became less aggressive. The tone softened slightly. It wasn't because the legal authority had lost power. It was because the approach being used wasn't working. The person they were trying to intimidate wasn't reacting like most people would. He wasn't shaken. He wasn't confused. He was steady and informed, and that demanded respect. Instead of relying on emotional appeals or public sympathy, he relied on something far more powerful: preparation. He knew that understanding the law himself would be more valuable than just hiring people to speak for him. He showed that real strength doesn't always come from having the best team or the most influence. It comes from knowing what you're talking about, especially in situations where details matter. This approach sent a message without the need for drama. Facing a judge or legal authority with confidence doesn't require disrespect or arrogance. It requires facts, calm thinking, and the ability to speak clearly about your position. In this case, those tools proved stronger than pressure tactics. Instead of folding under pressure, he became stronger with every word. Each answer showed that he wasn't just successful in business or technology, he was also capable of understanding the rules of the system itself. And when someone understands the system deeply, they are very hard to control. Most people think of billionaires as business experts or tech leaders, but not many expect them to have deep knowledge of the law. When someone who is known for rockets, cars, and artificial intelligence steps into a courtroom, the general expectation is that they will bring a team of high-paid lawyers to handle everything. People often believe that success in business does not always come with legal understanding. especially not on the level needed to go head-to-head with legal professionals. But sometimes, this idea can be completely wrong. In this particular situation, the person who was being challenged didn't just rely on legal advisors. Instead, he stood up and used his own voice. He didn't seem nervous or unsure. His words were clear, direct, and based on real legal principles. That's when it became clear that this wasn't just a businessman defending himself. This was someone who had spent serious time learning about how the law works, specifically, the kind of law that connects to technology, freedom of speech, contracts, and corporate structure. Many courtroom moments are filled with formal language and complex ideas. But this individual had the rare skill of breaking these down into simple, yet powerful responses. He referenced sections of the Constitution, quoted earlier court decisions, and explained how certain regulations were being misunderstood or misused. It wasn't just a matter of throwing around legal words. He explained why those words mattered and how they applied in that situation. For example, when the judge asked a difficult question, he didn't pause to look at a lawyer. He responded with facts. He explained that certain decisions must follow due process and that authority has limits even in a courtroom. He explained how innovation and regulation can work together, but that law should not be used as a weapon to silence or control. This wasn't just a defense, it was a lesson in legal balance. People in the courtroom began to pay closer attention. Even those who came expecting a one-sided lecture from the bench were now watching something very different. They were seeing a businessman turn into a legal strategist. Each point he made was backed by logic and legal grounding. He spoke about transparency and regulatory action, the risks of legal overreach, and the importance of protecting rights, even when technology is involved. He also made a key point about fairness. He explained how applying pressure through legal channels can sometimes create more harm than good, especially when it's aimed at those who are trying to change the world through innovation. He wasn't asking for special treatment. Instead, he was pointing out that the law must stay neutral and cannot favor control over progress. One part of his response focused on previous rulings that supported open platforms and the role of technology in modern communication. He described how companies must follow the law, but that law must also evolve. He wasn't just arguing for himself. He was talking about how legal systems should treat all tech companies. That showed vision, but also deep understanding of case, law, and legal evolution. What really stood out was how prepared he was. It was clear that he hadn't just memorized talking points. He had studied, researched, and fully understood the risks and rights involved. This wasn't someone hiding behind legal teams. It was someone standing in front with full awareness of what each word meant. There was a moment when the judge raised a complicated point about platform responsibility. Many would have shifted, uncomfortably, or asked for a recess. But he leaned forward and explained how user responsibility, moderation standards, and free expression laws interact. He even gave an example of a recent ruling where a platform was wrongly blamed for user actions. He didn't challenge authority rudely, but confidently, and backed every statement with real legal support. Observers, including legal analysts, began noting how rare this level of self-representation was among corporate leaders. Not only did he know the rules, he knew why they existed. He showed that real power doesn't just come from money or influence, it comes from knowing the system and using that knowledge to speak clearly, directly, and within the boundaries of the law. This moment revealed something important. When someone combines innovation with deep legal insight, they become nearly impossible to corner. Instead of being a passive player in a legal drama, this individual became an active force, one that shaped the conversation, challenged assumptions, and proved that legal genius isn't limited to the courtroom bench. The moment when the courtroom's atmosphere began to shift was subtle but powerful. At first, the legal challenge seemed one-sided. A powerful legal figure had taken a firm position, and many in the room expected a quick win. The situation looked like a standard example of authority confronting a business leader who had perhaps gone too far. Most observers assumed that the entrepreneur, although brilliant in his own field, would not be able to stand against the weight of legal experience and judicial pressure. But something unexpected happened. The man at the center of the storm, known around the world for space rockets, electric vehicles, and bold ideas, did not fold under the pressure. Instead, he chose to engage, not emotionally but with facts, logic, and a strong understanding of the law. As he began to respond, it became clear that he wasn't relying solely on his legal team. He had come prepared in a way that few could have predicted. He started quoting exact sections of law related to the issue. Not only that, he backed up his points with examples from real court decisions. These were not random comments, but carefully chosen references that supported his case. When asked difficult questions, he didn't stumble or delay. He answered smoothly, explaining why certain actions were legally allowed, and even pointing out how some interpretations of the law had evolved over time. It was as if he had studied law for years, not just read about it casually. The people in the room, including legal professionals and reporters, were visibly surprised. This was not the image they had of a tech billionaire. Most assumed he was good at engineering, innovation, and business deals. Few thought he would have such a deep and structured understanding of legal processes. What amazed them even more was the calm, methodical way he presented his points. There was no arrogance or showmanship, only focus and precision. The legal authority, who initially appeared in full control, began to ask fewer aggressive questions. Instead, the tone changed. There was curiosity and a bit of caution. This shift wasn't due to disrespect or weakness, but rather a recognition of something unusual. Here was a person not trained as a lawyer, but able to speak on legal matters like one. And not just speak, but challenge, defend, and clarify complex points with confidence. This moment turned into a lesson not just about law, but about preparation and intelligence. It showed that being powerful in one industry does not mean being powerless in another. More importantly, it proved that legal knowledge is not locked away for only those who wear robes or sit on benches. With effort, study, and strategic thinking, anyone can learn the rules of the system and use them effectively. Cool. Legal world is usually seen as a place of mystery to outsiders. Legal language is often complex, filled with terms that make it hard for the average person to understand. That's why most people avoid arguing legal points themselves. But in this case, the entrepreneur didn't let that be a barrier. He had clearly spent time reading, learning, and understanding how the law works. Not only the words on paper, but how they are applied in real situations. It also showed the importance of not underestimating someone just because their expertise lies elsewhere. The judge had likely expected resistance, but not detailed rebuttals backed by case law and legal interpretation. This unexpected depth created a different kind of respect. It wasn't just about winning or losing a legal argument. It was about showing that intelligence, when combined with preparation, can cross fields, whether it's science, business, or law. Observers took note of how the balance of power in the room shifted, not because the legal figure became weaker, but because the other side demonstrated strength in a surprising area. The businessman wasn't being defiant just for the sake of pride. He was engaging with substance and making his case through the very rules that were meant to control him. That's what made it so powerful. It was not rebellion. It was understanding. The whole situation became an example of what can happen when someone refuses to be intimidated and instead meets pressure with knowledge. Legal authority had to acknowledge that this was not just another public figure with money and media attention. This was someone who had taken the time to understand the legal system deeply enough to defend himself with facts. The surprise came not from attitude, but from the unexpected level of legal awareness. That changed everything.